Hello and welcome to the TMC Newsroom. My name is Rich Tehrani. Thanks for watching us today. We're at Interrupt 2011 in Las Vegas, and our program is Johnnie Konstantas. She is the Director of Product Marketing at Juniper Networks. And I thought today, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I thought we'd talk a little bit about cloud security. What's happening there?
Sounds great. It's a great topic for Juniper these days. Juniper recently acquired a company called Altor Networks, and subsequently has made available to the market a product called VGW, which essentially protects virtual machines and virtualized workloads.
So in terms of the threats that we're seeing, it's no surprise to most of the viewers that they seem to be growing virtually exponentially. I mean, we've had companies getting broken into to steal email addresses and credit card information. We had Sony's network getting hacked, their video game network getting hacked. It seems that once a month or so there's a major break-in these days, and those are the break-ins we hear about. Talk to me about why cloud security is different than other types of security.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the examples you just cited are examples of cloud-based networks essentially being compromised in some way. And when folks are talking about moving to cloud security, whether that's cloud computing rather, whether that's enterprises or organizations, one of the concerns that they have is that the underlying platform that they'll be using in implementing cloud computing, which is virtualization, that it might introduce new and unique challenges to security. And in fact it does. Because it's a new operating system, it's essentially a new attack surface. And because virtual machines and the traffic between them is really not visible to traditional methods of securing it, you need a specialized way to do that. So Juniper has purpose-built software for securing virtualization, which is essentially the underlying platform for cloud computing.
So the theory would be that within a server, virtualized machines could be talking to one another, communicating, and then have some sort of break-in in between, or maybe some eavesdropping or man-in-the-middle sort of virtual man-in-the-middle situation where data is being extracted or even injected, and trying to ascertain what's happening there and just finding problems and solving them before they happen?
That's one potential set of threats, but another would be virtually aware malware that resides in the virtualized environment and looks to take advantage of a virtual machine by taking it over and then communicating to its neighbors. What we want in cloud computing and implementing an environment where resources are shared is we want to be able to properly isolate them so that an organization's virtual machines are protected from one another and departmentally segmented off. Or in the case of a public cloud, that customer A's virtual machines are isolated from customer B's. Juniper's cloud security solution does exactly that. It essentially shrink wraps in security virtual machines so that any threat to one doesn't proliferate to others.
Now, most of the viewers watching today are probably thinking that, well, a virtual machine is pretty much its own machine and doesn't really have any sort of interaction with another machine in terms of if one is compromised, that it's not going to be easy to compromise the others. Is that not a fair statement that I just made?
Well, in the virtualized environment, actually what you have is you have a virtual machine host, which is essentially a container for a lot of virtual machines. So they can in fact communicate with one another freely and in all manner, which means that theoretically an attack on one could be populated to others, unless you have purpose-built security software in play, essentially isolating one from the others with a security policy, which is exactly what we do.
So hypervisor attacks, things like that, do those happen?
Well, they're largely theoretical currently, but what you do want is to be able to monitor the hypervisor and access attempts to it so that any attempt to bring it down is really prevented.
Okay,
and that's
so
part of the protection.
This is crucial, right? Because cloud vendors are popping up, it seems like everywhere you look, there's new cloud vendors popping up, and especially in a nascent market like this, which I mean, to some degree it's a mature market because we've been talking about software as a service and on demand, but by the same token, a flood of investment dollars are coming into this space, and subsequently we've got a bunch of new vendors who need to be aware of these sorts of threats. How do they find out more if they want to learn?
Well, certainly visiting the Juniper site and looking for the VGW solution would be one way. Also, essentially doing searches and good research on virtualization security, virtual machine security and hypervisor security will yield some good results there. But essentially, consumers of cloud computing services or implementers of cloud computing need to understand how to isolate those VMs from one another in order to properly protect them.
So what's next for Juniper and cloud security?
Great question. So what we want to do is essentially augment that security suite with layers and layers of defenses so that beyond merely isolating, we're controlling access, we're preventing malware from proliferating, we're discovering different types of attacks like, let's say, rootkits. So what you're going to see is layers and layers of defenses added on to the VGW product line so that customers are getting a myriad of protections for their virtualized environment or cloud.
And this is software running on the servers?
That's right. It's actually hypervisor based. So it runs within the hypervisor.
So really, I mean, what we're talking about here is that we're going to have to sacrifice some of the gains we're getting from Moore's Law, which seems like it's infinite. I mean, Intel recently came out with the concept of 3D microprocessors, so it looks like Moore's Law is safe for a while. But some of those performance gains have to go to security just to ensure that those systems are not suffering from attacks, right?
That's an interesting point you're making. Actually, with a hypervisor-based solution in play, you're not really getting much of a performance hit,
Okay.
maybe 3% on CPU. But really what you're going to see is wireline throughput, despite the fact that you're doing stateful firewalling within the virtualized environment. So the other way to think of this is, if it's a hypervisor-based security solution, it's not punitive to the virtualized environment. You can get as many VMs on those hosts as you want to.
But approximately 3% hit, you said, which is not
negligible.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks for being on the program today.
Thank you very much for
great.
having me. Thanks.